Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your host, Michael Moore, and with me are the usual PFF fantasy analysts, Jeff Ratcliffe, Mike Tagliere, and Brandon Marianne Lee. And it is the July 6th edition, so post-July 4th. We have all survived. We're all here to give you what you want, which is the fantasy content you all deserve now that it's officially fantasy football season. We will be going pretty hardcore for the next 2 months or so, and we will kick things off with actually a little bit of a slower news week, I guess you could say, which, hey, for a lot of guys, no news is good news, but we will jump right in. We wanted to start off this episode with a look at Mark Ingram and his role in the passing game. Just a little side note, 60 receptions his first 4 years, or 60 targets, I should say, his first 4 years, but 60 targets all of 2015, so he made up for that in a hurry. So, Jeff, why don't you kick things off? Can he sustain that this year?
Well, I have him projected maybe not to necessarily sustain that. I mean, we had him at 57. Keep in mind, PFF's target numbers are going to be slightly different than what we see in the NFL. You go to box scores, you'll see slightly higher numbers, but sometimes throwaways get counted as targets when they're really not targets. So either way, though, I think he'll be around the same number, but projected over 16 games. Still, that's impressive. That's an impressive target share when you look at some of these guys like Adrian Peterson, who isn't likely to see much more than 35 targets. So 55, 60 targets on the season. He's really that guy, and he's kind of emerged as that primary receiving back. The primary receiving back a lot of folks thought C.J. Spiller was ultimately going to be. So, for me, I do really like Mark Ingram, and I like where you're able to get him right now. I've been, sort of doing what the draft tells me to do in terms of value. I've drafted a lot of wide receivers early if I get those early spots because that's where I feel the value is. And then it ends up you draft another wide receiver at the end of the second round. In the beginning of the third round, typically I'm seeing Mark Ingram slide through and LaShawn McCoy slide through. Now, I prefer them in that order, but I don't mind either of those guys because they do have 3-down potential and 20-plus touch upside.
Yeah, no, if I could chime in here. Now, my concern with Ingram is obviously last year the Spiller injury was a big, huge, it didn't change the offense necessarily because the Saints are going to do what the Saints are going to do, but Mark Ingram never saw the target share that he did last year. Actually, heading into last year, there were just 2 games in which he saw 5 or more targets, and then he averaged 5 targets in 2015. So my concern is them drafting Lasco. He'll stick. I'm guessing Cadet is there. He's whatever. But then you got Spiller coming back, and Sean Payton's been talking him up a little bit. So I'm a little concerned with Ingram's reception totals. Now, if you're the workhorse in Drew Brees' offense, you're going to catch some passes. So I'm with you, Jeff, that I still think he's an RB1. I do worry a little bit about the PPR upside, though, just because of the fact that he's never had a 25-point PPR game. So when you're talking about the elites of the game, I don't think he's up there in that territory. But when you're in that second tier of RB1s, I think Mark Ingram's a good fit in there.
Well, yeah, and also kind of touch on that stat, Mike, that you said he doesn't have a 25 fantasy point game. Also, fun fact, he doesn't have a 1,000-yard season yet rushing. So, I don't want to say it's limited, but it's kind of limited, but you're still the number 1 running back in the Saints offense. Like, you're going to see the volume no matter what.
Yeah.
And just to address Lasco really quickly, you said, well, he's whatever, but he's a freak athlete. I mean, that's not necessarily whatever. And, take Spark Score for what you will. Spark Score, last year, if you look at the Spark Score guys who were in the top 10, David Johnson was number 2 on that list last year. Amir Abdullah was number 1. So is it a determining factor in fantasy ability? No, not necessarily, but it is a determining factor in athletic ability. Lasco 4th on the list among running backs, and really the top relevant running back on that list in terms of folks who were drafted this year or signed as undrafted free agents. So, Mike, that's a good call bringing him up. I like Lasco, and I think when you look at him for rookie draft purposes, he's a guy who slips in rookie drafts, and you can grab him a little bit later on. Now, you're probably not going to get much out of him, but there is the potential for injuries. There's a potential for him stepping into a prominent role in a high-powered offense, and it's certainly not unprecedented for rookies to surface randomly and play put up good fantasy production at the running back position.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. Actually, I was saying I was running through the running backs, and I said Lasco, and then I said Cadet, whatever. Cadet, he's one that's going to stick. But Lasco, I think he's a better dynasty pick. But I think you're right, though. I think he's a guy that he's cheap. Like you could draft him in like the last round in MFL 10s or whatever. But he's an interesting dynasty stash where C.J. Spiller hasn't been a picture of health during his career. So Lasco could be actually prevalent in his first year in the league behind Mark Ingram and C.J. Spiller, the definition of health right there.
I have two relevant things to say about this. Number one, Mark Ingram only had one game under 10 fantasy points in PPR leagues. So if you're looking for someone with a high floor, especially if you're doing a best ball in MFL 10 and he falls to you, that's money in the bank. I mean, how many people can you say that about in the league? Hello. It's just you sit there and you go, really? So in that regard, he's a different kind of player that you want to count on. And at the running back position, how rare is that? That is unbelievably rare. So I like that. Also, C.J. Spiller has 2 relevant seasons out of his 6. It's always something. Okay, it's always something, and it's going to continue to be something this year as well. I think they're pumping him up because he's a gadget guy. He's someone that they brought in to kind of be the Darren Sproles-esque thing. Then they realized, oh, well, Mark Ingram may not be the bust we thought he was. Remember, everyone had written this guy off. Maybe we don't need C.J. Spiller to be as Darren Sproles as we need him to just be on the freaking field. So I think they're going to try to weigh their options here. And I think that, yes, some touches will go away, but I think they liked having Mark Ingram as the workhorse. I think, if anything, it's that they have better weapons in the air now, and especially with adding Kobe Fleener and what have you. There might be a difference in opportunity, but I have no doubt whatsoever that he's going to be the guy on the ground moving forward.
What we need is C.J. Spiller on the Jets with Chan Gailey. That's what we need. Otherwise, I don't care about C.J. Spiller.
I just don't care about him. I'm sorry. I hate to be that Debbie Downer, but I'm with you. For 2 years, I've been like, why? Why do I have to keep talking about C.J. Spiller? It's not happening. But yeah, you're right. Chan Gailey, maybe. That'd be saucy.
Yeah, no, he's the poster boy for training camp all-star. But
yep,
going back to another point with Ingram, and look, I agree with you, Brandon, on how reliable, I guess would be the word there, when he's playing. But this is his season totals as far as games played for his 5-year career: 10, 16, 11, 13, and 12. Right. So, like, you just have to assume he's not going to play a quarter of the season. And if you're okay with that, then, look, God love you, and you can roll with that. So whoever is the backup there, whoever ends up winning that job, look, it could be Tim Hightower for all we know. He is back there, and he did perform well down the stretch. Well, maybe a relative term, but he did perform down the stretch last year. So,
but even with only 12 games, he was still a top 15 player in every single format, PPR or standard for running back position. So you bake that in, he's still a top 20 guy.
Oh, yeah. And look, just like all these guys we've talked about, there hasn't been a quality guy they brought in to challenge him. It's all a bunch of veterans and rookies later in the draft and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think we're all in agreement. He's a pretty solid value, especially where he's going in drafts right now. So. All right, the other hot topic, if you want to call it that, for this evening we wanted to touch on was the news that Paxton Lynch, rookie quarterback out of Denver, probably going to be redshirted, for lack of a better term, this season, so won't play much, if at all. At least that's the plan right now. Does this hurt or help the Broncos receivers? Let's start there.
I'll jump in and say I don't think it changes much for the actual Broncos receivers. I think what it changes, the trajectory of Paxton Lynch's career. I never like seeing a quarterback thrown into the fire, especially one who they're Super Bowl they're defending champs, and you're walking out into the field. You have high expectations. The receiving core is good, obviously, but I don't like seeing quarterbacks start right away. Blake Bortles, you saw what happened his first year. Blaine Gabbert was ruined. But then you look at guys that sat behind, like Aaron Rodgers, that sat behind Brett Favre and got to learn the position. Not to say you're going to learn much from Mark Sanchez, but I think it's actually a good thing that Paxton Lynch is set to redshirt his freshman year. If it were me, like, owning that guy in Dynasty, I think that's the best case scenario for Paxton Lynch.
Well, yeah, and let's remember, it's a pretty big stretch to go from playing at the University of Memphis to the defending Super Bowl champions and expecting to move the ball and perform well. But yeah, I think I'm with you, Mike. It doesn't do a whole lot for the guys there. To me, I'm I'm down on all those receivers this year. I mean, even Demaryius. I mean, Demaryius is going to be a wide receiver one, but is he going to be nearly as dominant and elite and fantasy productive as years past? Probably not. Mark Sanchez, fun fact, has not had a receiver in the top 20 every season he was a starter.
Well, that's the thing, and people are projecting. They're saying that Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas can both be relevant. I don't believe that.
No.
I believe that Demaryius Thomas is a 2, and I think that Emmanuel Sanders is a 3.
Right. No,
I'm going to jump in here and say, I'm going to blow your minds for a minute. It can't get worse than Peyton Manning.
Well,
So
I mean,
whatever those
Brock
stats
Osweiler.
were, and as a Broncos fan born and raised with season tickets during the Elway era, I can tell you the fact that there was any fantasy production on that team whatsoever was a godsend. Okay, so I think that you look at what's happened last year, and I think that is the floor. I think that's the floor. It's not a great floor, but I don't think it's going to get worse with Mark Sanchez, which I hate myself for saying.
Is it going to get worse with Trevor Siemian? That's the question.
But you know, a lot of those Denver peeps out there love Siemian. Love him. He is also training camp all-star. People think that he is just delicious. I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Mark Sanchez until he gets hurt, and then I think they're going to try out Paxton Lynch. I don't think they get redshirted this year. Elway got thrown to the fire. I think that he'll get down there and say, hey, if something happens to Mark, you're putting this guy in. So I think it's nice, but I'm not going to take just, some guy saying he thinks this is going to happen as gospel in June. So that's my.
Well, I also don't think that the Broncos are going to throw 600 times this year. So therefore, You're looking at his targets going down. The running backs didn't see any targets last year. The guys that are going to step in, whether it's Siemian, whether it's Sanchez, whether it's Lynch, they're going to check down a lot more than say a Peyton Manning or a Brock Osweiler did. Like I said, the attempts will go down. They're going to run the ball more. I don't see Demaryius Thomas getting 170 targets again. I don't see that happening. I think he's going to be closer in the 140 to 150 range. And while you say that, and I agree that, yes, you can't get much worse than Peyton Manning was last year, you're not going to get much better with Mark Sanchez or Siemian in there. That's my point. And then when your target share is going down, I just don't believe in this offense very much at all. C.J. Anderson worries me a little bit just because last year you had less talent there behind him, and he still didn't get the lion's share of carries. And then you add Booker to the mix. They obviously felt it necessary to draft him. So the offense, they obviously want to run the ball with the signing of Booker, or the re-signing of Hillman, the draft pick of Booker, C.J. Anderson paying him just as much as Miami wanted to. There's a lot of question marks surrounding this offense. And like I said, Demaryius Thomas, I think he's a safe floor guy. I don't think he offers you any upside, though.
Yeah, and I'm going to go even more conservative. I have him projected at 130 targets. So I think that target share remains relatively steady. But I agree with you; they're going to pass a whole lot less. And people are going to talk about, oh well, maybe they'll put Paxton Lynch in. Typically what we'll see is teams a lot of times will use a bye week to make big changes like that. And when you look at the Eagles, that can make a lot of sense. Sam Bradford open the season as a starter, and things are really bad. The Eagles have a Week 4 bye. They can pull the plug and put Carson Wentz in there and start the new era. The Broncos have a Week 11 bye. So that means you're going to have to go through 10 weeks potentially of Sanchez or Siemian or I don't know. So it doesn't bode positively for Lynch that he's this far behind these guys out of off-season activities. And, you mentioned Booker. Booker's really interesting. This is a guy who he's Arian Foster clone, maybe a little shorter, but he's got a lot of the same skill set of Arian Foster. And Arian Foster's coach, when he was really good for fantasy purposes, was Gary Kubiak. So, very interesting. They draft a guy who's basically a carbon copy of Arian Foster. I am not high on C.J. Anderson, not only because of the offense, and I think they're going to struggle a lot on the offensive side of the ball, but also because I think Booker does give him a run for his money this year.
I think they struggled last year on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, I guess I just don't know if it's surprising, I guess would be the way that I'd put it. I'd say this is kind of the trajectory it's been for the last 2 years. It's just like, yeah. So, I don't know. I think that their ADP is falling so much, though, that I don't know. getting better.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you're not going to hear a lot of Demaryius Thomas talk going into drafts this season. Just because let's face it, like we've covered here, there's not a lot to be excited about. But he still has the ability to be a wide receiver one. Now, I'm with you, Mike. It's all going to depend on, hey, how much are you passing it? Because they're not going to pass it as much. They're just not. Whoever is quarterback, Sanchez or Simeon or Lynch, I can't see them rolling the dice with those three guys. So they're going to pass less, but look, Thomas can still dominate on one-on-ones and in the pass game. So,
let's really quickly here. You mentioned ADP, and he's going as the 16th wide receiver off the board right now, which is exactly where we had him ranked in our draft guide. So let's do a little either or, and here's some players that are going close, and who would you rather? So you have Demaryius Thomas. Would you rather Demaryius Thomas or T.Y. Hilton?
Hilton.
Brandon?
Demaryius Thomas.
One to center. Hilton going 17. Demaryius Thomas or Julian Edelman?
Thomas.
Yeah, I would go Thomas, except in a PPR league. Julian Edelman is just my steadfast. I just can't get away.
I was going to say,
that.
I have two different answers on.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of league it is.
He's like why people don't like PPR, actually, is Julian Edelman, right? Where they're like, come on now, come on.
PPR helps Demaryius, though, too. It helps Demaryius a bit because the volume is what's going to drive his numbers. It's not going to be like splash plays or anything. So I think Demaryius' volume is there, too. That's why I'd say Thomas over Edelman. I think in both formats.
Yeah, it's pretty close for me. You do change things a little bit with PPR, but I agree with you there, Mike. I'm going to go Thomas. I'm going to go Hilton. How about this one? Thomas, and this is the last one. Thomas or Sammy Watkins?
Watkins.
Yeah, I'll go Watkins too.
I love Sammy Watkins this year. I think he's going to be a breakout. I think he's a top 4 or 5 guy.
Sammy Watkins currently going 18th among wide receivers in ADP.
He's dropping.
I have to agree with you 100% there. There are players who are going ahead of Thomas, though, as well. Brandon Cooks, 15. Kelvin Benjamin, 14. Then Brandon Marshall. Then it gets into the studs. So it feels about right where his ADP is right now. We'll see if it does lower.
Yeah, Kelvin Benjamin above him? Yuck.
I don't get that.
No, I don't get it either.
I mean... Yeah, he had a good season, but he's been literally out for a year, and it's not like they're a pass-first offense there.
Right, if he's being drafted at number 14, you're saying he's going to be better upon his rookie year, which was filled with nothing but touchdowns, and then they've added talent to that mix. So, no, Kelvin Benjamin's a low-end wide receiver, too.
That's exactly where we have him in the draft guide. By the way, if you haven't checked out the draft guide, go to ProFootballFocus.com. Check that out. Check out our draft tool. Check out everything, all the content. Our content is just cranking out right now. So definitely, help us out there. But Kelvin Benjamin, 23rd in our draft guide, 127 targets. He saw 142 in 2014. Of course, there was when nobody else was really there, and we have a little bit more to like in that passing game, not a ton. But, you look at Cam Newton, and he's a guy who's not going to throw for 4,000 yards. It's going to be very unlikely. So, you're talking really touchdown-dependent production. Benjamin scored 9 times in 2014. Can he get there again this year? He's going to need to justify that sort of ADP. I just think, people are reading way too much into last year's numbers from Newton. He was really efficient, especially from a touchdown standpoint, and I don't think Benjamin can return value at that ADP.
Yeah, no, I came across the number today, actually. I was going through some fun facts, and Cam Newton was 16th in pass attempts, but 2nd in touchdowns. That you can't keep that up for that long.
No, that's what we call efficient. So
yeah.
Now, speaking of receivers, let's touch on the coaching changes that occurred this offseason. We had 7, and some receivers to look at in those new regimes. So first up, my personal favorite for breakout status this season. The Dolphins hired Adam Gase as their head coach. Let's talk a little Devontae Parker, shall we? He's ticketed for that sort of Demaryius Thomas, Alshon Jeffrey role that Adam Gase has sort of force-fed in his previous offenses. Devontae Parker sort of fits that bill physically. Is it crazy to assume that, or not assume, but is it crazy to think he might end up as a wide receiver 1 this year?
I don't know if I would.
Anyone.
Go ahead,
yeah,
Jeff.
for me, I think that is a little bit crazy. And I'll tell you exactly why. Leonte Carew is exactly why. And people are overlooking this guy. This is a guy who's Anquan Bolden, but faster. You know, he went 4.50 in the 40. Immensely productive last year at Rutgers. Very, very skilled receiver. He's going to blow right by Kenny Stills. He's going to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets, and we're going to see them run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. And we're also hearing today that Gase wants to up the tempo. You look at the Dolphins last year running about 66 offensive snaps per game. That's about 3.5 fewer than the Bears, and about 4.5 fewer than the offensive coordinator Christensen's. He coming from Indianapolis, so 4.5 fewer than there. We're going to see more pace out of this offense, probably closer to 70 snaps per game. That bodes well in general. But, you know, you look at Parker, I love the pedigree, but it's just there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed. So that's the one thing where I'm kind of not necessarily sold on him being that wide receiver 1.
Well, just real quick, Jeff, a stat on that. So Adam Gase's first year in Denver as offensive coordinator did have 3 receivers with over 100 targets. So, he's been down this road before of passing the ball around.
Peyton Manning in his heyday is so nothing like Ryan Tannehill. My head just exploded. Like, I just had an aneurysm. We can't talk about it that way. What?
I think the biggest issue. Oh, and I think the biggest issue with Parker though is going to be the schedule. I don't know if anybody's taken a look at the schedule and some of the tough corners. Now here's the thing. So Devontae Parker is going to be the insto de facto wide receiver 1 in that offense because Jarvis Landry doesn't fit the mold. Leonte Carew is still young. He's a rookie. Still got to pass Stills. I think he's going to pass Stills. I love Carew, but when you look at Parker, they're starting off with the Seahawks, the Patriots, the Browns, the Bengals. Then jump a few weeks to the Bills, Jets, Chargers, Rams. Like, he's going to face some of the top-tier corners in the league, and they're not going to stick those corners on Jarvis Landry playing a slot role. Or he's going to see a lot of those number 1 corners, so I think you're going to see Parker a bit up and down. I love the talent, but I just don't know if I love the way that things are lining up with the other options that they have in this offense. I'm not a huge Jarvis Landry guy, but he's an above-average talent. And then you add Carew into the mix. I know Gase has talked about getting Jordan Cameron more involved. I know that our own Jeff Ratcliffe, sitting next to us here, is huge into Thomas Duarte. But there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and that's where I worry about Parker. And like I said, being the number 1 receiver in an offense, you're going to see the most attention. And I don't know if he's ready for that, or they have other mouths to feed instead of him. They don't have to force it to him.
Huge into Thomas Duarte is what it says on my business card. No, I'm not huge. I think he's a really intriguing player, Jordan Reed-like skill set, but the fact of the matter is that he's on the roster bubble for sure as a 7th rounder who is really raw and doesn't necessarily do everything that you want from a football standpoint. So if he makes the team, I think he's intriguing. If he doesn't make the team, he'll be practice squatted, and we'll have to pay attention to him from there. But, hey, I mean, you're talking 3 receivers with 100-plus targets. That's pretty rare to see that happen, especially if you have Jordan Cameron in the mix and Jay Ajayi and Kenyon Drake. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. So I have my concerns. I actually, we have Parker at 33 in the draft guide. And I think, you could argue a little bit higher. That's perfectly fair. But I wouldn't go much higher than sort of a borderline wide receiver 2, so maybe back end of the 20s, somewhere in that range would be about as high as I'd be willing to go with Parker.
Okay. I don't think that it's impossible for him to be a very productive fantasy option. I guess my problem is Ryan Tannehill. Again, 37% accuracy rate on 20-plus yards, and we need that for Devontae Parker, right? We need that down the field passing. I don't think Adam Gase is going to improve Ryan Tannehill to the point where he's going to all of a sudden become Peyton Manning. And I don't care if Peyton Manning shows up in Florida. It doesn't matter to me. It does not matter to me because I've seen years of Ryan Tannehill tape, and he is frustrating. And he has a lot of potential too. It's fine. But I think that Adam Gase is getting I think he's great. I think he's very smart. Again, wonderful. But Peyton Manning runs his own offenses, and he did give him a lot of, let's say, play calling status.
Freedom.
Yeah, we'll go with freedom.
Tannehill's getting freedom this year too, though.
But you know what? Cutler got freedom, and what did we get?
Cutler, hold on a second. I'm going to chime in there because Cutler played a lot better than people think he did last year.
Sure, but how did his receivers do?
Well, he started half of his games with Mark Marianne and Josh Bellamy.
What receivers?
Yeah, I don't even know. Alshon Jeffrey was out half the year, and even when he was playing, he was hobbling around. It was a joke. I mean, Zach Miller, he made Zach Miller into something. But like I said, Cutler actually did play very well last year because, like, I got to watch it. It's almost like our grading standpoint. I got to watch Cutler and actually judge him on a quarterback just watching the guy, and he was actually a lot better than people think last year. That's why Gase got promoted. I mean, everybody saw kind of what he did with a Bears team that had little to no talent and turned it into a playoff contender.
10 of the 16 weeks, the defenses that went up against the Chicago Bears offense were in the top 10 for defense scoring fantasy-wise. They were turnover machines. Now, I'm not saying that he's bad. I like Adam Gase. I'm just saying that if he had more time with Cutler, I did see an improvement, absolutely. And when you look at some of his stats and what have you, especially with what he had on the field. But I don't think that Ryan Tannehill is going to all of a sudden become Pro Bowl status, is what I'm saying. And that's what it would have to be to get Devontae Parker to where I would love for him to be. And I think he can be based on his talent.
I mean, to be fair, though, about Cutler has this reputation as being a coach killer. And what Gase did is he worked with Cutler and then became the hottest coaching name on the market. And he could have taken any job he wanted. Yep. So to his credit there, and I'm not going to read too much into the turnovers. And sometimes the fantasy production from team defense is so heavily weighted towards touchdowns. Fantasy production in general is so heavily weighted towards touchdowns, which it has its faults. So I'm not going to read too much into that and too much into the turnovers. I think that, Mike, you make a good point. Chicago outkicked their coverage from just a talent standpoint last year, and he did a great job. Now, hey, jury's still out on Tannehill. I think, fifth year now, it is kind of make or break, rubber hits the road time. We'll see. He has freedom.
Haven't we been saying that for like 3 years, though?
Yes, every year he's been
3 years ago, he was a second-year guy. I don't think that's fair to say, well, make or break season for a second-year quarterback.
No, I agree.
Now we're at a point where, it is. Fifth year, supposedly franchise guy. It's really time. They give him the coach. They're giving him the keys to the car. He has all the weapons you could ever ask for. So if he doesn't do it now, and let's not forget, PFF did grade out Ryan Tannehill very well in 2014. So if he doesn't do it now, he's never going to do it. But I agree, he's the deciding factor. He's the straw that stirs this drink or potentially pours this drink out.
And let's face it, if he does well, then Adam Gase is probably the greatest offensive coach of our time.
Ever.
We can just say it now. Say it now. That's what we were saying about Kyle Shanahan, too, remember?
Ooh.
Below the belt.
We'll get to that. All right.
We
let's
will.
move on. Another coaching change. You had Doug Peterson take over the reins in Philadelphia for Chip Kelly, who we'll get to in a second. But obviously the receiver of name there in Philadelphia, Jordan Matthews, the lightning rod Jordan Matthews. Last year, 126 targets, 85 catches for 997 yards and 8 touchdowns. Can he go higher, or is the offense going to limit him and sort of keep him at that level?
I want to hear, Jeff, I know you're an Eagles fan. I'm interested in your take here because I know we had a little Skype chat talking about this, and you were saying that Jordan Matthews isn't transitioning well to the outside. Is that what you've been hearing?
Yeah, he is not. And I'm a fan of all 32 teams, Mike. There's something to like about every single one of them, even the Jacksonville Jaguars. But no, I pick on the Jags. But hey, it's the best league in the world. It's the best sport that has ever been created. And the Eagles, well, in Philadelphia, we have our finger on the pulse here. Jordan Matthews has really struggled on the outside. Now, the thought process was that Chip Kelly put him in the slot because he was the best receiver and to take advantage of mismatch every week. Unless you're going against the Cardinals, you got to play against Tyrann Mathieu or something like that. But otherwise, it's a great matchup for Jordan Matthews week in, week out, and it's a terrible matchup for Nelson Aguilar week in, week out. Well, the new coaching staff comes in, they put Jordan Matthews on the outside, and they realize, oh no, this guy can't play on the outside. So we have a potential problem there. And if that's the case, this isn't an offense that's going to run 3 wide 85% of the time like Chip Kelly's offense does. They're going to run a lot less 3 wide, which means he might not be on the field. he may be on the field for only 70% of the offensive snaps, and that's not going to return value at his current ADP. He's certainly not going to do what he did last year. And when you look at his production last year, he scored 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games, and 2 of them were in Week 17. We talk about fantasy production, and we often include Week 17 in those end-of-season numbers. And, hey, you look at him, 2 touchdowns in the last week when basically nobody is playing, so it doesn't really matter that much. I'm not crazy about this, and I'm also not crazy about the fact that the Eagles are going to run about 10 fewer plays per game in terms of pace. The Chiefs, one of the lowest paced teams in the league. The Eagles last year were one of the highest. So that's going to completely flip-flop for this team.
Yep, 61 plays a game is what Doug Peterson's offense ran last year with the Chiefs. Their run-to-pass ratio was a little higher than what the Eagles would have had. The attempts are going to go down. Sam Bradford shouldn't be throwing the ball as much as he did last year anyways. But yeah, I agree with Jeff on the Peterson offense as a whole. Now, Jordan Matthews playing outside, I don't know. It's something we just haven't seen yet. And obviously, when you hear something negative in the offseason, that's what you should pay attention to more than you pay attention to the positive things, because all you ever hear about is C.J. Spiller, and you hear about Michael Thomas and how he's going to be the next Marcus Colston, all these things. So when you hear something negative, it's definitely something you want to pay attention to, which is why I wanted to direct that question to Jeff, just because I think that he's heard more about Jordan Matthews playing the outside than I had. So it's something definitely to keep an eye on, though.
Well, and I think I saw PFF's own Neil Hornsby say that if Matthews doesn't get on the outside, that's going to cost him like 200 snaps, which is just catastrophic to his fantasy value. So, yeah, that's definitely the thing you want to watch for with Matthews. If he doesn't get that outside slot, then I think you can write him off. But
trade him to the Saints for Michael Thomas.
Yeah, they need another receiver. So,
by the way, can we talk about Michael Thomas just really quickly here? Okay, this is a guy who basically never played in the slot last year, and now we're expecting him to be a big slot this year. I have some concerns about that. I'm not a football coach, obviously, so what the heck do I really know? But typically these guys are accustomed to playing in certain areas of the field, and Jordan Matthews shows that really well. He was used to playing in the slot. Now you put him on the outside, and it's not like Larry Fitzgerald, a future Hall of Famer, who you just, you can put him wherever. He's going to learn a new position, and he'll be great there as well. So I have concerns, and I voiced these concerns over and over, and yet all we hear is, oh, no, he's going to be the big slot. So we may want to pump the brakes a little bit on Mike Thomas.
I agree. I've been saying that. I'm a big fan of him in dynasty leagues, but as of right now in redraft, I have no idea how people are starting to push him into the high 30s. I don't see it.
Like I said, Willie Snead all along. I'm trying to tell you people. But all right. So the previously mentioned Chip Kelly lands in San Francisco. Maybe, not the best. Well, I don't know how many other offers he had, but it's going to be a challenge, to say the least, out there. So Torrey Smith, really the only fantasy-relevant receiver out there, is showing some good things. What do we think his ceiling is out there?
It's top 15 wide receiver. I think that's hands down. I don't think anybody can argue that point on Torrey Smith being a top 15 wide receiver. Finished as a wide receiver 2 in each of his years with Baltimore, each of the 4 years, and then he goes out to San Francisco and doesn't see the football. Even though I know a lot of people will say it was the deep ball that did it, that gave him the production that it did, but he was I want to say it was 20th in average depth of target. But he was number 1 in yards per reception and number 2 in yards per target. So he was productive when given the opportunity, whether it be from Colin Kaepernick, who was graded the worst quarterback in the NFL by PFF, or Blaine Gabbert. So when you talk about Blaine Gabbert, I'm okay with it. I'm fine. As long as he can be competent. That's all I want, is a competent quarterback that is willing to throw the ball to Torrey Smith. Torrey Smith, with the talent that's surrounding him on that team, running 70 plays per game, running backs that really don't necessarily catch the ball that well, Torrey Smith, I see him as a lock for 120 targets. And when you talk about a guy that's going to see 120 targets that has seen that once in his career, yet finished as a wide receiver too, I don't understand. Like, it's one of the puzzling things, and I played fantasy football for almost a decade now, but it's rare to find a player who's being so underdrafted. I just don't get it. It might be last year. It might be the whole boom or bust factor, but Chip Kelly has made it work with Jeremy Maclin. He's made it work with Sean Jackson. Even Riley Cooper, when he had to step up, he did. Jordan Matthews, all these receivers have produced with their targets under Chip Kelly. I don't see any reason a guy that actually can play football well, like Torrey Smith, I don't see there being any reason he doesn't finish as a top 25 option, if not top 15.
Okay. Well, and
I think we've gone a little over the top with the Torrey Smith. I want to say, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Chip Kelly, who knows what he's going to do? What if he does with Jordan what we thought he was doing with Jordan Matthews and put Torrey Smith in the slot, which would make no sense. But it's Chip Kelly. Can we really rule it out?
Well, no matter how you feel about Chip Kelly as a head coach, he's actually a pretty smart offensive coordinator. I think we could say that. His offensive play calling is up to par. He did fine with Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews worked out there. So if he puts Torrey Smith in the slot, I'm okay with it because obviously he knows more than I would. But I don't see him doing that. Torrey Smith has played under 10% of his snaps out of the slot for his entire career. So I don't see Torrey Smith all of a sudden transitioning into that role. I think that's more of a they're working in, forgetting his name right now, Bruce Ellington. They're working him into that whole slot role right now, it seems. So I'm actually interested in him in deeper leagues. If you're looking at MFL 10s, he's a name you should keep on your list. But Torrey Smith is, I'd bet money that he finishes as a top 25 wide receiver.
Well, I mean, he had 56 targets last year. So you're saying you think he could triple it?
Triple what's that?
His targets. He had 56.
The targets? Oh, yeah. 100%. With Bolden gone, with Chip Kelly in running 70-something plays per game, 100%. I think Bolden ate up, I think he was over 100 targets last year. Those have exited. Quentin Patton's not doing it. DeAndre Smelter, he hasn't flashed at all. They're talking about him actually being on the roster bubble. So I've been paying close attention. I wouldn't speak this way if I didn't feel extremely good about it. And like I said, I wouldn't bet that he's a top 15, but if he's healthy, if he's guaranteed healthy, he's finishing as a top 25 receiver.
All right, time for my Quentin Patton stat. One of just 2 receivers last year to average more than 7 yards after catch per reception. The only other one to do so was Martavis Bryant. So there's a lot of upside with Quentin Patton. There's upside with Eric Rodgers. There's upside with DeAndre Smelter. I think we're going to see some interesting things out of this wide receiver group. They're maybe not talented at the front end. They're sort of not front-loaded like some of these wide receiver cores, like the Jets obviously are pretty top-heavy. But, there's sort of deeper talent. You mentioned Ellington as well. I don't know if we can just lock in Torrey Smith for 130, 140 targets. I think, we see him more in the 100 to 105, somewhere in that range, which still he can be very productive. The problem is you look at what he's done over the course of his career, and he hasn't seen that target volume, but even when he did, so he saw almost 140 targets in 2013, caught 65 of them though, so not a high catch percentage. And then in his 2014 season, his fantasy production was really touchdown dependent because he did score 11 times. So I don't know if we can necessarily just say, hey, he's a really good football player. I think he's a good 9-route guy for sure. But he has a ways to go to really prove that. So I'm a little bit less bullish here, more bearish on Torrey Smith. I think he is still a value where he's going, but I'm not going to place any wagers on him finishing top 25.
Well, and I loved him when he was going really low. Now I think he's creeping up, though, like the wall, and he's getting to that point where I'm like, oh, well, maybe, But I agree. I mean, yes, the ceiling, though, for sure. I mean, sky's the limit with all these guys. They're all professional athletes. But Chip Kelly scares me. If this is supposed to be coaches and new places, he scares me on a fantasy level, on a personnel level, on a management level. I feel like there are a lot of levels here. And I'm hoping Torrey Smith breaks through. I'm hoping you're right, Mike, because I have him on some teams already. So I'm in the way that he was a bargain. I'm not in with him being a top 15 or other people thinking he's a top 15. Only our listeners can think that.
And I think that you can blame Mike solely for his ADP rising.
I don't think I have that much.
I
don't think I have that much.
It's you. You're ruining my life. No.
You gotta be smart about it. You can't just even if I believed and I had him ranked as a top 25 receiver, if he's being drafted at number 46 wide receiver, you don't draft him at wide receiver 25 because that's part of the game. You play it as you get value. So I understand, and I'm not saying that he's a lock for top 15. All I'm saying is that there's a chance that he's a top 15 receiver, and I think it's a clear-cut advantage over those other receivers you mentioned, like the Pattons, the Rodgers, and all them. So the 100 targets, that belongs to somebody like Alan Hearns, who's got a bunch of talent around him. We're talking about a guy that he's surrounded by a bunch of questionable talent. And that's all it is in San Francisco wide receiving core outside of him. And I know that you're saying that it's questionable and he's an excellent 9-route guy, but I believe that that's what the Ravens used him for. I mean, they had Anquan Bolden there. They had Steve Smith for part of it. So there were guys that played those underneath routes where Torrey Smith didn't need to be that complete receiver. But as his time went on in the NFL, you noticed Torrey Smith become more and more of a complete wide receiver. So as you mentioned, there was the 1 year he saw a ton of targets, but outside of that, he was never a target hog. I just feel like he's never played in an offense like this, and I'm excited to see it. I mean, that's the best part about all this, is that we get to see everything play out. We get to see if we're wrong or right, but I'm planting my flag right there on Torrey Smith's planet.
I don't know. I think I'm with Brandon. You could see like Bruce Ellington get 1,500 yards just out of nowhere, just to like screw with people.
And you know what? I've been a Bruce Ellington believer for 3 years. I mean, I'm like the person, like, if you're in Dynasty, just hold on to him. I'm telling you, once he gets a good coach, he'll blossom into this thing. And I've been a fool.
There you go.
had your Torrey Smith bets with Bruce Ellington.
That's right. I'll just have him, at the very bottom of all that, and be like, oh, just in case.
All right, well, let's run through the balance of the coaching changes and some receivers in those offenses. So you've got the Cleveland Browns with Hugh Jackson now at the helm. I think we all agree Corey Coleman is destined to be a target hog in that offense. But the question is, what receiver after Coleman are you guys targeting?
Hollywood, baby, Hollywood. Rashard Hollywood Higgins is the guy. He is going to emerge as the number 2 in that offense, and he was the last of the 4 wide receivers they drafted this year, but you look at what he did at Colorado State. In 2014, he was PFF College's number 2 graded wide receiver overall, and then last year he was the number 12, so still a fantastic season. The guy is super sleek. The guy is polished as a route runner. He's very skilled, and they're talking today, they're tweeting out today and yesterday that he is the favorite to start along with Andrew Hawkins and Corey Coleman. So for me, definitely going Hollywood Higgins there. But, hey, it's going to be a really run-heavy offense with Hugh at the helm, and essentially who knows at quarterback, but Bronco-like problems at the quarterback position. So maybe not a ton of Hollywood this year, but definitely he's going in the end of the 3rd round in rookie drafts, and I absolutely love him there. So you can scoop him up and get some great value.
Terrell Pryor. I'm totally kidding.
Josh McCown.
They're going to cut him. They're going to cut him.
That's so crazy.
They're going to cut him for cap space.
When will Josh McCown just find some team that loves him? When will we find love, really?
What they need to do is play him so they can see what talent they have everywhere else, because the problem is otherwise they're auditioning RG3. You know what I'm saying? Like, RG3 is going to make everyone else go like this, and we'll just see what happens with him. And then with McCown, everyone else can be better, and we don't care, right? We're like, well, we didn't draft McCown anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate. All right.
To be fair with McCown real quick, he has been in the league since about 1972. Yep. So he's made a good bit of money, and we don't really have to worry. Actually, it was 2002 was his rookie season, so he's been around for quite some time.
Yeah. He's like the Madonna of football. He's just changed with the league.
He keeps reinventing himself.
Keeps himself relevant. Yeah.
Hangs out with Diplo.
All right. A couple other receivers to look at. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers promoted offensive coordinator Dirk Cutter to head coach. Obviously, Mike Evans is the man there, but how high can he go? Let's start there. So I'll start at once.
Yeah, the Mike Evans, his ceiling has yet to be seen. I'll agree with you there, but I think everything went the way it was supposed to. Like the way it could have for Evans last year is the way it went. I mean, Vincent Jackson got hurt. Safarian Jenkins was hurt for most of the year. Jameis Winston proved to be a very competent NFL quarterback in even his rookie season. So when you look at all the factors that kind of played in, you had Dirk Cotter come there, and he was the offensive coordinator. You look at all the reasons why Mike Evans should have had a monster season. He didn't. I found a number today. He had 9 more fantasy points than Ruben Randall on like 53 more targets. So Mike Evans, the problem with here, okay, so we all know what the ceiling is with Mike Evans. My problem with him right now is that I was looking forward to getting him as a discount this year because I figured we're going to see that potential untapped. But people are acting as if last year never even happened. I mean, all they do is point to 1,200 yards. Well, he also had like 150 targets. So, I mean, Mike Evans, the talent's there. I just hope that he puts it all together because, I mean, in order for him to, I mean, he has to perform. He has to have 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns to live up to his, early second-round ADP now. So you're not getting it as a discount. That's my issue with him. The ceiling is as high as it gets, though.
He got the same amount of touchdowns and the same amount of yards per run or yards per reception as Vincent Jackson last year.
Yeah.
Just FYI, the Vincent Jackson everyone's decided is dead and is not drafting for whatever reason.
His legs really have fallen off, though.
Well, sure. I mean, absolutely. And he only had 500, yards because he was hurt and what have you.
Right.
But I'm just saying, for the discrepancy for ADP to be that huge,
right.
I just want to remind everyone they actually had similar stats in a lot of categories.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, no, and I think you bring up an excellent point. Vincent Jackson's going to be tremendous value this year. Just because, like you said, people completely forgot him due to the injury, but he still performs at a high level when he actually plays. So.
You do have to look at it, though, from a ceiling standpoint, and if you really want to win your league, you can't always be looking at those sort of safe guys. I think you get him at a nice value. He's 52nd in ADP right now.
Oh, yeah.
But look to the depth chart. There's a name who stands out. We haven't seen him yet, but yeah, Kenny Bell, baby. This guy was a combine freak, ran low 4.4s. He ran sub 4.4 at his pro day. He jumped 41.5 inches in the vert, so explosive. Didn't see him much in Nebraska because that's not really what they do there. But, there's a lot of buzz surrounding him. All he has to do is beat out Lewis Murphy, and then he could be that third receiver, and he could potentially be, in the mix to possibly pass Vincent Jackson in targets. Now, I'm not going to predict that today or anything along those lines, but these are the names that we need to know. This is an upside guy. Vincent Jackson doesn't have much upside. He has a relatively high floor when he's on the field, but Bell, we don't know what his ceiling is. Well, we know his floor is probably super low, but that's the sort of thing that I want to know out of these offenses, these deeper players, not necessarily, Vincent Jackson. It's not super sexy for me.
Well, and look, let's face it, one of the main reasons they kept Cutter was they wanted to continue to develop Winston into that, franchise quarterback. They didn't promote Cutter to keep running the ball. They did it so he could keep tutoring Winston and keep encouraging him and all that stuff. So. Although
I do think they're going to run the ball still a lot, and I think that actually signing that kicker tells me that they're just trying to get down the field and they want 100% accuracy from him because they are going to win games by small amounts. How I took that draft pick actually, very specifically. No, I mean I think that they want to be 100% 3 points whenever they can get on that side of the field. And I think that they knew that they lost a lot of games by small amounts, that they have a quarterback that's talent's emerging. I think that they will still run the ball. I think there's a little too much worry. I think that they're going to stop doing that. I think they're still going to ground and pound.
That'll be the next episode of the Fantasy Slant, just all kickers all the time.
Just the whole kicker show. Kicker analysis. Guys, points are points, though. Don't ignore them. I have won many a game because someone didn't change out their kicker who was no longer with the team. Get it together.
Drop the kicker spot in your leagues.
We got to add the punters and talk some Pat McAfee, baby.
It is more consistent than defenses. There are more consistent players than there are in tight ends. I'm telling you. Get it together.
Next episode, Brandon just gets 40 minutes to talk about it. All right. So real quick, a couple of easy questions. So you've got the Giants also promoting their offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, to head coach. I'll make this really simple. Does Odell Beckham finish lower than third in fantasy, barring an injury?
No. He's second.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I have him ranked third. I think he's right there.
Okay. So, yeah, top three. I don't think you can go wrong with that. And we will round out with a really depressing team, at least fantasy passing-wise. The Tennessee Titans kept Mike Mularkey as head coach. Who's the receiver, if any, to own there fantasy-wise?
Tajay Sharp. I'm gonna go with I'm rookie obsessed at this time of year because I spent 2 months of my life looking at rookies nonstop. But I think it's really interesting because Dorial Green-Beckham's going to get the buzz. Absolutely is, and we know that. And don't waste any time on Kendall Wright. We've been down that road so many times before. That ship has set sail. But people are going to look at Dorial Green-Beckham. They're going to look at the body. Guy's built like Calvin Johnson, doesn't have that skill set, but we know he was on the upslope. He performed well down the stretch last year as well. But when you go into off-season activities and you're supposed to be an ascending player, and all of a sudden this rookie out of UMass who does everything right blows by you on the depth chart, that's a big concern. And Sharp, hey, this kid put up big numbers at UMass, and it's not unprecedented that we see a UMass kid enter the NFL and kind of take the league by storm a little bit. Obviously, Victor Cruz did the same thing. So I like Sharp a lot. I don't think he's going to be anything for fantasy purposes. I think we're going to see tons of exotic smash mouth running and not much throwing out of that offense. I'd be surprised if Mariota gets even close to 4,000 yards passing. But Sharp, for dynasty purposes, especially as this team continues to grow, as Mariota continues to grow as a player, Sharp is very, very intriguing, and I'm down on Dorial Green-Beckham right now.
And I hear that a lot, Jeff, and honestly, I can't disagree. I think there's enough question marks surrounding Dorial Green-Beckham to make me scared of him, to actually draft him where he's being drafted. But the name I'm not hearing anybody talk about is the one that they signed this offseason, Rashard Matthews. They brought him in there. The guy's going to start. I mean, Kendall Wright's going to start as well. So I think DGB is going to enter on 3 wide sets and maybe battle with Tajay Sharp for that. But I think Rashard Matthews and Kendall Wright are the 2 wide receiver sets. And then you got to worry about Delanie Walker. There are so many options in here. You're probably best off to just stay away from the Titans wide receiving core and maybe even Delanie Walker. But honestly, for me, it's a contract year. And Jeff, I know you're bored of Kendall Wright, but at the start of the year, when him and Mariota were on the field together, when they were both healthy, they showed a little bit of chemistry. I think in PPR leagues, I think you could do worse than Kendall Wright. I think he's a high floor player when he's healthy. I don't think, I agree, the ceiling's not there, but I don't think the ceiling's there for any of these wide receivers in this offense. I'll just take the guy that's guaranteed to get targets, and I guess I'd have to go with Kendall Wright there. He's boring. I get it. We've been there, but in a contract year, certain guys can stay healthy more than they've been in years past. So I would tend to stay away from the entire core, but if I had to take one in a PPR league, I guess it'd be Kendall Wright at where they're currently being drafted.
My concern is that he doesn't line up in 2 wide receiver sets because he doesn't like to run the route that he's supposed to run. He just goes out there and does whatever the heck he wants to do. And if you're Randy Moss or somebody like that, okay, you can get away with doing those sorts of things, but Kendall Wright can't get away with doing that, and he's going to have to be precise, especially when he comes out of the slot. I'm not sold on him. I'm really down on him. I have him projected at 88 targets, and I think that's a pretty fair number. I don't think he leads the team in targets.
I think Rashard Matthews is where the value is. I think that this guy is going to break some fantasy hearts. And I think that he's someone that's probably going to have a slow start, and then in week 3, you're going to pick him up off waivers and be happy you did.
Yeah, but yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Just stay far, far away. So.
Yep.
I said waivers. I didn't say draft.
All right.
I want to be clear about where I'm putting my flag on this one.
You're good.
Flag today.
All right. Well, for our PFF Fantasy Analyst, I'm your host, Michael Moore, and we will see you next time on the Fantasy Slant.